The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from World Tales by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Foreword. That lurking air of hidden meanings and immemorial mythical signs which we find in some fables, recalling a people, wise and childish at once, who had built up a theory of the world ages before Aesop was born. Ernest Rhys, 1925. The content of folklore is metaphysics. Our inability to see this is due primarily to our abysmal ignorance of metaphysics and its technical terms. A. K. Kumuraswamy. The folk tale is the primer of the picture language of the soul. Joseph Campbell. They, tales, appeal to our rational and irrational instincts, to our visions and dreams. The race is richer in human and cultural values for its splendid heritage of old magic tales. Dr. Leonard W. Roberts. Introduction. It is quite usual to find collections of tales arranged according to language or country, tales of Belgium, stories from the German, or legends from the Indian peoples. Some such titles must have met your eye at one time or another. It all looks very tidy, scientific even, and the study of stories is indeed a part of scholarly research. But the deeper you go into things, the more mysterious, exciting, baffling they become. How can it be that the same story is found in Scotland and also in pre-Columbian America? Was the story of Aladdin and his wonderful lamp really taken from Wales, where it has been found, to the ancient East? And if so, by whom and when? A classical Japanese narrative is part of the gypsy repertoire in Europe. Where shall we pigeonhole it in national terms? I have selected and placed before you a collection of tales of which one at least goes back to the ancient Egyptian of several thousand years ago. It is presented here not to impress the reader with its age, but because it is entertaining. And also because, although the pharaohs died out many centuries ago, this tale is recited by people all over the world who know nothing of its origins. This form of culture remains when nations, languages, and faiths have long since died. There is an almost uncanny persistence and durability in the tale which cannot be accounted for in the present state of knowledge. Not only does it constantly appear in different incarnations which can be mapped, as the tar baby story carried from Africa to America, and medieval Arabian stories from the Saracens in Sicily to the Italy of today, but from time to time remarkable collections are assembled and enjoy a phenomenal vogue, after which they lapse and are reborn, perhaps in another culture, perhaps centuries later, to delight, attract, thrill, captivate yet another audience. Such was the great Panchatantra, the Far Eastern collection of tales for the education of Indian princes. The Jataka Buddhist birth stories believed to date back 2,500 years. The 1,001 Nights, known as the Mother of Tales. Later came the collections of Straparola, Boccaccio, Chaucer, and Shakespeare, and a dozen others which now form the very basis of the classical literature of Europe and Asia. This book contains stories from all of these collections and many more, because there is a certain basic fund of human fictions which recur again and again, and never seem to lose their compelling attraction. Many traditional tales have a surface meaning, perhaps just a socially uplifting one, and a secondary inner significance, which is rarely glimpsed consciously, but which nevertheless acts powerfully upon our minds. Tales have always been used, so far as we can judge, for spiritual as well as social purposes, and as parables with more or less obvious meanings, this use is familiar to most people today. But, as Professor Geoffrey Parinder says of the myth, its inner truth was realized when the participant was transported into the realm of the sacred and eternal. Perhaps, above all, the tale fulfills the function not of escape, but of hope. The suspending of ordinary constraints helps people to reclaim optimism and to fuel the imagination with energy for the attainment of goals, whether moral or material. Maxim Gorky realized this when he wrote, "In tales people fly through the air on a magic carpet, walk in 7-league boots, build castles overnight. The tales opened up for me a new world where some free and all-fearless power reigned and inspired in me a dream of a better life." When relatively recent collectors of tales, such as Hans Christian Andersen, the Brothers Grimm, Perrault and others made their selections, they both re-established certain powerful tales in our cultures and left out others from the very vast riches of the world reservoir of stories. Paradoxically, by their very success in imprinting Cinderella, Puss in Boots, and Beauty and the Beast anew for the modern reader, they are all very ancient tales widely dispersed. They directed attention away from some of the most wonderful and arresting stories which did not feature in their collections. Many of these stories are represented here. Working for 35 years among the written and oral sources of our world heritage in tales, one feels a truly living element in them which is startlingly evident when one isolates the basic stories, the ones which tend to have travelled farthest, to have featured in the largest number of classical collections, to have inspired great writers of the past and present. One becomes aware, by this contact with the fund of tradition which constantly cries out to be projected anew, that the story in some elusive way is the basic form and inspiration. Thought or style, characterization and belief, didactic and nationality, all recede to give place to the tale which feels almost as if it is demanding to be reborn through one's efforts. And yet those efforts themselves, in some strange way, are experienced as no more than the relatively poor expertise of the humblest midwife. It is the tale itself, when it emerges, which is king. Erskine Caldwell, no less, has felt a similar power in the story and is well aware of its primacy over mere thought of philosophy. A writer, he says in Atlantic Monthly in 1958, is not a great mind. He's not a great thinker. He's not a great philosopher. He's a storyteller. Idries Shah. Tales of a Parrot. An ancient Sanskrit work, now lost, is believed to be the original of the parrot tales, which have been found in folk recitals from Indonesia to Italy. The 14th century Persian Tutinama, or Parrot Book, by Nagshabi, is the collection of linked tales best known in the East, and it is still very widely read and recited. There is a derivative Sanskrit version, the 70 Parrot Tales. Many of these stories, told by a parrot to divert his mistress while her husband is away, are found in the medieval Seven Wise Masters, which circulated for centuries in Europe with a popularity second only to the Bible. The book is found in Greek, Hebrew, and other languages. The first European version is thought to have been prepared by the monk Johannes of the French diocese of Nancy in about 1184 AD. The tales are thought to have been dispersed among the people of the West by wandering preachers. By such means, says the eminent scholar Clouston, stories, which had their birth in the Far East more than 2,000 years ago, spread into the remotest nooks of Europe, and jests, which had long shaken the shoulders and wagged the beards of grave and otiose Orientals, became naturalized from cold Sweden to sunny Italy. The frame story of the Parrot Tales, split into 3 tales, was collected by the learned Giuseppe Pitre in Sicily over a century ago from peasant lips. Several versions have been found in Italy. The interest of this one, apart from its entertainment value, is the fact that, unlike most of the folk tales of similar origins, it stems from the Sanskrit version, and not from an intermediate Islamic source, such as the Turkish, Arabic, or Persian collections. The medium through which a Sanskrit-based tale reached Europe is not known. 1. Once upon a time there lived a king, who had an only daughter, who was the sun, moon, and stars to him. He gave her everything which she desired, and there was nothing in the world which she was denied. On the day when this story begins, the king and the princess went driving out into the countryside, as it was springtime. So many beautiful flowers were in every valley that they drove quite a long way. They stopped the royal coach, walked about for a while, and after picking a few blossoms drove back to the palace. Now, no sooner did the princess return to the palace hall than she saw with dismay that her favourite toy, a beautiful lifelike doll, had been left behind somewhere, on a hedge maybe. She was out of her mind with grief, for that doll had been hers since ever she could remember, and as she had no brothers or sisters, it was everything to her. The doll was dressed as she was daily, and had almost as many jewels as the princess herself possessed. So she decided that, without telling her father, she would slip out at the first possible moment and go to look for the doll. It was not long before the king went to change his robes, and she found her chance to escape through a secret exit. Not being very used to going about alone, however, the princess was soon completely lost. Night was falling when she saw a fine palace in front of her. Knocking on the door, she shouted, "Who is the owner of this magnificent building?" She called out in a most regal way, and the captain of the guard who was at the entrance said, "Lady, this is the palace of the great and glorious King of Spain." "I am a king's daughter," she said, and she was at once admitted and taken to a guest chamber. There she was undressed by several maids and robed for the night with much ceremony. She soon fell asleep, and without any fear, since she was in a royal household, slept as if she were safe at home. Next morning she was taken before the King of Spain. He was very impressed with her appearance and with her manner and charm. "Will you remain here with me and administer the palace as if it were your own?" he asked, for he had no daughter, and his wife had been dead some years. "Certainly, I should be happy to do so," said the princess, and she soon felt that she had never lived anywhere else in the world. But there was trouble in the palace among the courtiers. 12 royal maidens who were related to the King of Spain by marriage felt that they had been passed over for a complete stranger. Gossip and intrigue circulated, and soon the courtiers had taken sides. Some were for the royal maidens, others were for the princess. "How can we take orders and instructions from one so young and inexperienced in our ways as this girl?" they whispered. "Who indeed is she? Though she says she is a true princess, let us plot her downfall." So they went to her, and with smiles and giggles said, "Oh, dear lady, why do you not come with us upon our next outing? There are many things we could show you, far away from the confines of the court." "Oh, no," the princess shook her head. "I am not sure I can go anywhere without the permission of dear royal papa. He never likes me to leave his side." "But we know a sure method by which you can be spared," said they. "Let us tell you what to say to his majesty." "What am I to say?" cried the princess. "Just say, 'By the soul of your daughter, you must let me go with the royal maidens,'" they murmured in her ear. "Very well," said the princess. "I will try it." But no sooner had she said the fateful words to the devoted king than the smile left his face, the light of anger came to his eyes, and he shouted, "Ah, wretched girl, how dare you speak to me like that? To the trapdoor with you!" And the unfortunate princess felt herself propelled towards a large trapdoor in the floor. She soon was falling through time and space, falling in the most horrible darkness. Suddenly, she stopped falling, and could feel the wood of another door. She turned the knob blindly, and it gave way. Then she felt tinder and matches in her hand, and lit a lamp. Another door stood half open, and slowly advancing, the princess saw in the light of the lamp a beautiful young girl, as fair as the moon on her 14th night. This unfortunate young creature had her hands bound and a silver padlock on her mouth, so that she could not speak. The princess looked at her questioningly, and the girl indicated that under the pillow was a silver key. The princess found it, and saw that it was set with a green stone in the top. The princess unlocked the girl's lips, and she said, "I am a king's daughter, stolen away by a wicked magician. He had left me here for I do not know how long, and feeds me when he comes. Every night at midnight he arrives, with 2 slaves carrying bowls of food and fruit." "But tell me," said the princess, "is there any way in which you might be freed? This imprisonment must be torment for you." "I can only find that out by asking the magician," said the other. "So tonight conceal yourself under the bed, and listen to all that passes between us. I shall try to wheedle some sort of information regarding this out of him, so listen well, dear lady, and save me if you can." "That I shall do, with all my heart and all my strength, if it comes to that," said the princess, and she got under the bed in readiness for the arrival of the magician. When 12 o'clock came, the door flew open, and a strange-looking man with a long dark robe, white beard, and fierce, piercingly blue eyes appeared, attended by 2 coal-black slaves of savage aspect. The magician took the key, unlocked the younger princess's lips, and with every sign of affection, fed her with his own hands from the bowls. While she was eating, he was paying her extravagant compliments, and she said, "Now, just for argument's sake, if I were ever to escape from here, how could it be done? I pray you tell me that I might be diverted by the telling of it." The magician looked taken aback for a few seconds. Then he smiled and said, "Well, since there is no chance that you ever could be able to do it, I will tell you. It would be necessary for someone to put gunpowder all around the palace, and at midnight, when I appear, set light to it. Then it would blow a complete circle around the palace, and I would be blown up into the air. But eat these delicacies. You would not get food like this in the world except through my magical agency." The young girl laughed, and passed it off as though the idea meant nothing to her. After that, the magician caused one of the slaves to wash her mouth with rose water. The magician dried it himself with a fine napkin, and he went away, not forgetting to lock her lips again with the padlock. After a short while, the princess came out from under the bed and said, "Sister, sister, have no fear. I will go and summon help from my adoptive father up there in the castle. Somehow you will be rescued, or we shall be blown up together." She crept out of the room, climbed through the trapdoor, and began to shout for the King of Spain. The King of Spain, who had missed her after she had disappeared through the trapdoor at his command, came to her, and she told him the whole story from beginning to end. He said, "I will send for the captain of the guard, even though it will be the middle of the night, to make a ring of gunpowder around the castle as soon as he possibly can get the men roused. I myself will light the powder at the very second 12 o'clock strikes. Leave it to me, and go back to your own room, my dear." "No, no, father," cried the princess. "I have promised that poor girl that I shall rescue her, or we shall both get blown up together." "So be it," said the King of Spain, and the brave princess vanished again down the tunnel. She comforted the girl with the silver padlock on her lips as well as she could, and whispered words of encouragement to help her pass the hours of waiting. The king's sappers began digging, and worked away with a will to prepare the mine. The day passed very slowly for the two girls. By the time it was nearly midnight, the gunpowder was ready in one large circle all around the castle. When the clock struck 12 midnight, the magician came as usual through the door of the chamber. The princess was hidden under the bed, and the girl with the silver padlock on her lips looked as she always did, patiently waiting for him. The torch set the gunpowder alight, a ring of powder ignited, and the magician was blown into the sky in 1,000 pieces. The two girls were severely shocked for a few seconds, but soon began to laugh with joy and relief, though they had singed eyebrows, torn clothes, and blackened faces. When the King of Spain saw them climbing out of the tunnel, he exclaimed, "Ah, my beautiful daughter! Come to me and be with me here in harmony for the rest of our lives. You, my dear," he added to the brave princess who had effected the rescue, "you shall have the crown after I am dead." "No, no, dear King of Spain," cried she. "I am a king's daughter myself, and I, too, have right to a crown." So a feast was prepared which took many days and nights of jollity. This matter spread all over the earth, everyone taking the story to his or her own country, and everybody talked of the great courage and goodness of that beautiful princess who had saved another king's daughter from certain death and dishonor. And all the chief actors in this tale, except of course the magician, enjoyed life and happiness in all the days of their sojourn in this world. 2. Once there was a king who had an only daughter who was as beautiful as any young girl ever born to humankind. On her 18th birthday, news came that the king of the Turks wanted to marry her. "Oh, what do I want with a Turk for a husband?" she said, and refused to have anything to do with him. Soon after this affair, she lapsed into a very unhappy state of health. She, who never had anything wrong with her in her life before. Her father the king sent for doctors from far and wide, but none could be found to help her, let alone to tell what was actually wrong with the princess. She lay on her silken sheets, eyes rolling, body shivering, her limbs twisted under her. Her poor father was in distress, and called the wise men of his capital city together. "My friends, hear me at this time of my personal distress, as you did when the country was in danger from enemies," he said. "Tell me what I am to do." "Your Majesty," said they in unison, "find the princess of whom we have just heard, who caused the rescue of the daughter of the King of Spain from the dreaded magician who hid her away and locked her lips. Find her, and she will find a way." For the princess who wrought the miracle had become the talk of every country in the world, and there was no quarter of the earth where her name was unknown. The king ordered ships to set out that very hour to search for the lady. "If the King of Spain will not let her leave him and come, then shall we go to war against Spain, though she be the mightiest country of Christendom," said the monarch boldly, with eyes of fire. The ships set off, and arrived off Spain very soon. All their guns blazed in salute across the bay. The envoys set foot on the earth of Spain, and bent down to kiss it in homage. A message from a faraway king to the King of Spain," was the cry. The sealed letter borne by an envoy dressed in scarlet and gold was handed to the King of Spain. He broke the seal, and let his eye wander over the message. But he clenched his fist and shouted, "I will go to war, but I will never send my dearest adopted daughter on such a mission," and he tore up the letter. The princess came from behind the ivory screen and asked, "What is it, royal papa? Who was that letter from, and what is this about?" "Dear daughter, the king of another country has sent his ships to take you away to help in the affair of his daughter. You shall not go, I forbid it." "What are you afraid about? I will return to you in time after I have settled this thing," she said. So she went, after taking leave of him with great tenderness. When she arrived, the king went to greet her. "My daughter, if you cure this child of mine, you shall have my crown," he vowed. "I am a king's daughter myself, and I already have a crown," she said, as she had said to the other king. "Let us see what the matter is. Never mind about crowns or coronets." She was taken to the princess's bedchamber and saw her lying there all wasted away. Now after a few moments' thought, the princess, who had just arrived, turned to the king and said, "Your Majesty, have some soup made and some chickens cooked, also cheese and fruit. Have these things brought to me here, and lock me in this room alone with your daughter for the space of 3 days. No matter what you hear, or even if I cry out for you to open up, do not do so. Within 3 days I will deliver your daughter to you alive or dead. Remember, whatever I say to you, do not open the door." Soon everything was done to her liking, and the great bolts were fastened on each side. But when she went to sit beside the princess as the light from the windows failed, she discovered that they had forgotten the tinder to light the candles at night. So she poked about in cupboards with the unlit candle in her hand, looking for a tinderbox. One of the doors led to a small room, and looking out of the window she saw a light in the distance. She could not stand the dark, so she descended from the window with a ladder of silk to try to find the light. When she got near the light, she saw it was a huge black cauldron placed on a fire. There was a tall Turk stirring something in the pot with a stick. She greeted him with, "What are you doing, O noble Turk?" And he replied, "My king wanted the daughter of this king, but she did not want him, so he is having this done as a bewitchment." "Oh, poor Turk," she said, laying her hand on his sleeve. "You must be tired, stirring like that for so long and so bravely." "Yes," said the Turk, "I am rather tired now, and I wish that someone else would help me." "Why, I will help you," said she. "You just lie down there, and I will continue stirring for you." "That is extremely kind," said the Turk, yawning, and he lay down. she took the stick and began to stir. "Am I doing it correctly?" asked the princess. "Yes, indeed, beautiful lady," the Turk replied. "If only I could sleep for a little while." "Well, you take a sleep now, and I will stir," said she, and the Turk fell into a doze. When he was asleep, she bent down, and with her amazing strength threw him into the boiling cauldron. When she saw that he was dead, she lit her candle at the fire and returned up the silken ladder to the bedchamber. She sat beside the sick princess's bed and saw that she seemed to be better. For 3 days and 3 nights she nursed her and fed her with the delicacies which the king had provided. When the princess got up on the morning of the 3rd day, perfectly well again, the girls embraced each other and called through the door for the king to open it. He came in at once and kissed them both with great joy. "Ah, my daughter," he said to the princess who had wrought the miracle, "I owe you my kingdom and my daughter's life. What in the world can I give you to repay you? Tell me, I am at your command." "Nothing my gifts have brought me are of any value. I only work by the power vested in me by Providence," she replied. "Stay with us here," pleaded the king, "and you shall be as dear to me as my own daughter." "No, you threatened my father with war if I did not come, remember," she said. "And my father will declare war upon your country if I do not return at once, so let me go, with your leave." Sadly, the king agreed, and, thanking her again, gave a great feast in her honor. Loaded with costly presents for herself and her father, she soon departed, and returned to the King of Spain's palace. (3) Once upon a time there lived a king and queen who had a handsome son whose only diversion in life was to go hunting. Morning and noon he hunted, attended by many huntsmen. Now one day he was far afield when he saw a most beautiful doll lying on the ground. It was dressed like a real live princess would be attired, and even had real jewels in its ears and round its neck. He looked everywhere to see where the owner of this fabulous doll might be, but there was no one to be seen in any direction. So he took the doll up onto his horse as if it had been a lady, and declared to the others, "We shall return home at once now," and they rode back to his father's kingdom. In his private room the prince examined the doll, and placed it upon his mantelpiece, looking at it long. "What a beautiful doll," he said again and again to himself. "If the doll is so beautiful, what must its mistress be like? Surely it is made in her image." After he had taken the doll to his room, the prince would not leave it, gazing upon it fondly hour by hour, murmuring, "Just think of the mistress if the doll is so beautiful." When he had not seen the prince for several days, and the court physician told him he had been keeping to his private apartment, the king went to see him. He found the prince looking at the doll on the mantelpiece, muttering feverishly, "If this is the doll, how beautiful must be the mistress." "My boy," cried the king, "are you completely out of your wits? What are you doing with that image? Have you become an idol worshipper in the space of a few days since you came back from your last hunt? Tell me the truth of the matter at once." The prince turned lackluster eyes upon his father and said in a low voice, "If this is the doll, just think how beautiful the mistress of such a doll must be. Just think of the mistress if this is only the doll." Horrified at his son's wasted appearance and strange manner, the king went back to the throne room and summoned all his courtiers. He said, "See what has happened to my son. Has he become mad? What is to be done? The physician says he has no physical ill, no fever, no broken bones, but his mind has completely gone. Such a man cannot possibly take my place as ruler when I am gone. What is to be done?" One aged sage stepped forward and bowed before the throne. "Speak," said the king. "Your Majesty, people are talking about a miraculous princess who goes from kingdom to kingdom curing people. She is said to have found the King of Spain's lost daughter, and to have cured another princess only recently. Send for her, and if she will not come, declare war upon her father." "Well said," agreed the king. "Send an envoy for her at once. I will brook no delay. My son must be cured for the sake of the country and the people, if not for mine." So a suitable courtier was sent with a long retinue and a sealed letter from the king. When these foreigners arrived, the hall of audience was full of people thronging through it. The princess looked from behind the carved screen and said to the king, who was reading the letter, "What ails you, father?" "Nothing, nothing, my dear," said the king, frowning and biting his nails, tossing the letter into the corner rolled up into a ball. "There must be something wrong. Who are all these strangers at court? And what news does that foreign envoy bring in that letter which you have thrown away?" she asked gently. "It is war," said the king testily, "unless I allow you to go on yet another of these ridiculous journeys to the far corners of the world." "Is someone ill again?" she asked. "Yes, this time a young prince who is behaving very strangely and seems to be quite out of his wits. I do not think that I should expose you to these dangers," said the king. "I must go. I shall soon come back, I promise, dear father," said she, and after he had embraced her, she set off. With many attendants and soldiers, the princess's journey took quite a time, but at last she arrived at the prince's private room. He was looking at the beautiful doll and sighing deeply, murmuring to himself the while, "Oh, what a beautiful doll! If this is the doll, just think how wonderful the mistress of this doll must be." But as he was now so feeble, he said it all under his breath. So the princess said to the king, "Close me up in this room with the prince for 3 days. Lock the doors and do not come in until I call you to open them. Leave some food here for me to give him daily, and in 3 days I will bring him out alive and well, or dead." They did as she asked, and she sat with him, feeding him chicken broth sip by sip, until she made him stronger. At last, when he was able, he called in quite a loud voice, "Oh, what a beautiful doll! If that is the doll, how much more beautiful must be the mistress!" "Ah, wretch!" cried the princess. "So it is you who have got my doll." He raised himself on one elbow and said, "Are you the owner of the doll?" "Yes," she said, "I am. Now drink this chicken broth and get well." When he was able to get out of the bed, they called through the door to his father that he was cured. So the king and the courtiers came in and carried the prince out to the people, happy and well, looking even more handsome than he had before. The princess took down her doll from the mantelpiece and hugged it for sheer joy. Soon the prince told her that he was in love with her and begged her to marry him. "For though the doll is beautiful," he said, "you are so much more beautiful, as I knew you would be. Will you marry me and become in time the queen when I am king?" And so she answered that she would. The king, delighted to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law, gave her many jewels, and the people were wild with joy at having the famous princess for their prince's bride. Several letters were written and sent with trusted messengers right away. Among them, one to the King of Spain, to tell him that she would not be returned to him as a daughter, but later she would go back with the prince to pay their respects, and another letter to the king whose daughter she had cured. At the time of the wedding, which was one of great splendor, all the monarchs came together and helped to make the princess's good fortune complete. And she lived in great peace and happiness till the end of her days. This podcast is copyright 2018, the Idries Shah Foundation.